This video will show how to replace the filaments on a standard MKS open source analyzer. We will use a standard double filter analyzer with tungsten filaments. The procedure is the same for other filament types, such as thoria or yttria. The analyzer type can be identified by the serial number engraved on the vacuum flange. This analyzer starts with MKS 022, but the same procedure will apply to any analyzer starting MKS 0 or MKS 1. These analyzers will all have the same type of ion source. Before starting, you will need the following items: a clean bench to work on, a pair of clean gloves, either cotton or talc-free plastic gloves are okay. You should never touch the vacuum parts of the analyzer with your bare hands. A method for holding the analyzer vertically. If you don't have an analyzer stand, the MV2 control unit can be used instead. A small flat-bladed screwdriver, preferably with a 2 mm blade. A small pair of needle-nosed pliers. A clean container to hold small parts and screws. A pair of tweezers. A replacement filament. A new copper gasket to refit the analyzer to the vacuum system. A digital voltmeter to check the filament continuity and to check the analyzer for electrical shorts once you have finished. Before starting, note the position of the filaments and the 3 barrel connectors that make the filament connections. There is a diagonal wire connecting the filament common on both filaments. One of the connections goes to this common pin. There is then a connection to each of the other pins, one for each filament. Holding the first barrel connector with the pliers, loosen the 2 screws clamping it to the wires. It's not necessary to remove these screws, just loosen them so the barrel connector can be removed. Remove the barrel connector and place it in the clean container. Repeat the procedure for the other 2 barrel connectors. Next, remove both M2 screws fastening the filament plate to the analyzer. Once you have loosened them, it is recommended that you hold the screws with the tweezers to remove them. Place the screws in the container. With the screws removed, you can now lift the filament plate vertically with the tweezers to remove it from the analyzer. With the filaments removed, check around the source cage and repeller for any remnants of the old filaments that could cause a short. Check for any signs of contamination. Ion burns like this are okay. Any surface contamination, such as tungsten oxide powder, caused by blowing the filaments in air, should be cleaned off before fitting new filaments. Once you are happy the source is clean and free from surface contamination, open the replacement filaments packaging. Being careful not to damage the filaments, use the tweezers to place them on the top of the analyzer between the source and repeller grids. Line up the 2 mounting holes on the filament with those on the analyzer. Using the tweezers to hold the M2 screws, refit each screw in turn to hold the filament in place. Next, fit the barrel connector to the wire connected to pin 4 of the analyzer and the filament 1 connection on the filaments. This is the filament pin that is not connected to the other filament by the linking wire. Normally it is easier to use the pliers for this and to place the barrel connector over the wire first and then pull the connector in and place over the filament leg. Ensure that there is at least a 2 mm gap between the bottom of the barrel connector and the filament plate, and the barrel connector is oriented correctly, and then tighten the 2 screws. Fit the second barrel connector to the filament common and the wire connected to pin 8 of the analyzer. Ensure the barrel connector screws are pointing away from the other filament leg. Fit the final barrel connector to the filament 2 connection and the wire connected to pin 10 on the analyzer. Make sure the screws are pointing away from the other barrel connector and that the 2 barrel connectors are parallel to each other. When complete, the filament barrel connectors should be positioned like this. Note the gap between the 2 adjacent connectors. Also, on the filament common connection, which is the 2 pins connected by the link wire, a barrel connector should only be fitted at one end. Check the gap under the barrel connectors. There should be at least 2 mm gap between the connector and the filament plate. Check the filament continuity. Measure between filament common and the filament 1 connector. Then between common and filament 2. The resistance of both filaments should be below 1 ohm. Then measure the resistance between filament common and the filament plate. This should be open circuit with a resistance greater than 100 megohms. Then measure the resistance between filament common and the source plate. This should be open circuit. Finally, measure the resistance between the source plate and the repeller plate. This should be open circuit. The filament replacement is now complete and the analyzer can be refitted to the vacuum system using a new copper gasket.